Hey, what's going on, everybody? Thank y'all again for tuning in to one of the dopest indie podcasts on the planet. Of course, this is the Dope Sessions podcast. I am, of course, your host, LoFi Kelvy. Man, I hope everybody doing good. I hope everybody doing great. As you can tell by my voice, I do have a bit of a sinus infection, but it is going away, and I'm feeling a lot better than I was before. But we're gonna go ahead and get into it because on this episode, I'm going to do a movie review slash commentary, right, about the new documentary Luther, Never Too Much. The film is written and directed by Dawn Porter, and this film is about the life and the career of Luther Vandross, right? And if you grew up like I did and heard Luther's music, you knew that Luther Vandross was a special talent. But there's things in this documentary that I personally did not know about. I didn't know about, him being a part of this group that would always sing at the Apollo. I didn't know about the whole Sesame Street stuff. I didn't know his extensive jingle work or background. Like I knew a little bit about the background singing, but I didn't know about a particular, you know, uh, background singing he did for David Bowie. And if you know about David Bowie is basically one of the greatest artists of all time. He's basically a chameleon, and whatever album he does, he can transform into anything. Like he at one point in time he was Ziggy Stardust, and that album is amazing. But David Bowie is about that. David Bowie, if you look at videos from like the '80s when MTV started busting out, David Bowie was the one who called out in MTV for not playing back black artists. Um, but this movie is really good. The documentary is really good. Like I want you to understand that documentaries are built to tell stories. If you're looking for something that's out of the ordinary, then I'm pretty sure it's not going to be your cup of tea. Because sometimes with filmmaking, people want to, I just want to see it, I want to see something different, even if it's a documentary. But that's not the case of documentaries. It can be for some, but not all the time. This is a by the numbers documentary, but it's still a great documentary. And it just won a NAACP Image Award for Best Documentary. Um, Again, Luther Vandross is one of those amazing talents that when you're listening to the radio or your mom or your dad or your grandparents are playing certain songs, I guarantee you the majority of those songs that they're going to be playing is Luther Vandross. Like, of course, the name of the movie is Here Now, and that was a great Luther Vandross song. Like, um, you know, Dance with My Father and Can I Take You Out Tonight, and all these amazing classics. Not only was Luther Vandross an incredible singer, but he was an incredible writer. He was an incredible performer. He was a showman. He was a showman, and if you got to see him in tour, you saw that. He was a great director, and I believe the reason why he was such a great director is because all of this stuff goes into, and this is why I think a lot of people are having a problem with like somewhat newer R&B, is because it's the Michael Cox thing when he said the thing that's lacking with R&B, right, is the church. A lot of these singers went to church. They were singing in choirs. They were singing in quartets. They were singing in men choruses and women choruses and praise teams and all this other stuff. And that either circulated from that point to background singing to doing jingles because Luther Vandross was doing that, and then doing this stuff on your own. Like if you think about the great singers like Luther Vandross and Diane Warwick and Aretha Franklin and so on and so on and so on, they begin to hone in on their craft and be able to sing the way that they were able to sing and use the voice as an instrument because it all comes from the church. And so when I think about Luther Vandross and if he was still alive, would he still be making music, especially with the landscape of what R&B is now? I wonder, would he still make music? And he did get the chance, and in 2000 with his last album that was on J Records, which was Clive Davis's um, record label. Like after watching this film, I felt very, very emotional because there was a couple of things that I saw in this movie that really got to me. I'm gonna say those two things. So one of the things is about Luther's weight. And as a person who has weight issues, I totally connected with that because you do not know what people are actually going through in their lives. And yes, sometimes there are jokes that are said that we can take and we can laugh at. And then there's jokes or the way people ask questions. Because as talented as Luther Vandross is, he was always hit with questions about his weight and questions about his sexuality. And then that's the other point. Now, whether Luther Vandross was gay or straight does not bother me. But the issue that I had, especially when it comes to the media and the industry, because essentially what happens is the industry has always been about a certain look, right? Luther Vandross, whether he was skinny or big, probably didn't look like everybody's typical thoughts of what a man should look like or anything of that nature. So you're always getting hit with if you don't look a certain way, at least you can look this way. Because if your face is one way, your body at least should be this way. And you get stuck in that image game. And because you're getting stuck in the image game and you already have internal issues, that becomes a problem. Because when you are losing weight, stop. And I'm telling you this because again, I've talked about my weight issues on here before. So when you're losing weight and the weight is coming off and you're feeling good and people are saying things like that, there's always going to be questions about your weight. And that can be a trigger for something to happen to where you go back to eating because you haven't worked out. You can work your body out, but you haven't worked the mental out. And because you haven't worked the mental out, you're not strong enough to take some of the things, even if it's just questions about, you know, your weight. Like Luther was not only always getting questions about his weight, there was always jokes behind it. And there was always jokes about whether we like skinny Luther or big Luther. Like Eddie Murphy, I want to say in Delirious made some jokes. And then if you look at Cedric the Entertainer's stand up spot in The Kings of Comedy. And these both play in the documentary. You could tell that there was some jokes in there, whether, you like Big Luther, Skinny Luther, and all of this. So, as well as Luther could take those jokes, they were also jokes that hurt. And because you want to keep up in this game, you do lose the weight, but people are still talking about it and people are still finding little issues. So then that still does something to your mind. And because you don't do the hard drugs, you ain't sniffing coke, you ain't doing crack, you ain't drinking alcohol and all this other stuff. So your comfort becomes food. your drug becomes food. And I know that because even though I can say that there are some issues that I have been able to deal with, there's still some that's in me. And because those issues haven't been worked on, I too fall into the trap of food. I'm not fixing like 30 plates just to feel food full. My issue becomes snacking. And because I like to snack, and sometimes I'll even skip dinner just so I'm like, I don't feel like cooking. You know what I'm gonna do? I'm just gonna eat some chips and some dip. I might just eat some gummy bears and drink like a Coke or something like that. And so I think after that, that's the issue and I'm done with it. But it's not. So I believe if we're going to be more um, diligent in how we treat people, especially in the industry, we need to understand that everybody is still human. But I also understand that this business is all about image. It is about how you look physically, from the face to the body. And also going back to Luther's sexuality. Whether or not he was gay or straight, it is none of our business. But because we're so much into image, we're trying to figure out, okay, well, what is he? Is he straight? Is he gay? We're trying to find out. And there's a section in the film, and I remember when the documentary came out, people talked about Patti LaBelle. And Patti LaBelle's people thought that, hey, you're making Patty look bad. She is one of Luther's friends. Yes, she is. And I don't think that the scene that they played in the movie makes her look bad. I think what it does is say, hey, if all his other friends didn't open their mouth to say whether he was gay or straight, then you shouldn't have done that either. Even if he said something to you, if he didn't tell the public, that's not the public priority to know that. And I actually like the scene where Luther kind of addresses it a little bit and he says, hey, what I owe you is this talent. I owe you this music. I owe you, kind of like what if you see me in doing shows, I owe you a great performance. I owe you a show. I owe you this music. My personal life, I don't owe that to you. And I applaud that because what the industry does, and especially the media, not only do we want to pry into your artistry, but we also want to pry into the lives. And you shouldn't know anything about my life. And I shouldn't be able to share anything in my life with you unless I want to. And that is through my art. And when I give you that part of my art, you shouldn't be asking me any more questions, trying to pry more into my life. And so in the industry, there is this thing of why do we care about why somebody looks the way they do, or are they are they getting bitches? Are they getting dick? Like why is that the issues that we are most obsessed about in the industry, and some of the fans too, because we are. And the fans have to hold themselves accountable too, because guess what? We're asking those questions. We're looking into things. We're trying to figure out if Luther is gay or if Luther is straight. And if he is straight, how come I ain't never seen him with no bitches? That's none of our business. But yet we make it our business because because people are in a business of wanting to know everything. I wish Luther Vandross was still alive, and I wish he was able to figure out the issues so he can lose the weight and maintain it. Because people don't understand that's the issue too. Sometimes it's hard to maintain the weight. But again, we lost an amazing, talented person, and I'm glad that this movie is out, and I'm glad we get to see it. And I want to thank y'all again for tuning in to the Dope Sessions podcast. I'll see you next time. Peace.